Well, let's talk about Brexit, another big story in the news this week, because we've seen some members of the Cabinet saying that if there's no agreement, they would support an extension to Article 50 and a delay to Brexit. I mean, is this a breach of collective responsibility?
Well, I read the article, and the letter rather, and I thought that actually it was. My general sense is that you can have rows behind closed doors, you can argue with the Prime Minister, you can try and get the Prime Minister and the government to move in a particular direction. You can even sometimes indicate that, and the media pick that up. But I think what's really difficult is if you then state that an opposition to the government that you are part of publicly, I think that becomes an issue. The Prime Minister has made it clear government policy is not to rule out a no-deal situation, because you can't. You know, we are due to leave on the 29th, and the Prime Minister made it clear we want a deal. She's got a deal on the table. They're looking for adjustments at the moment, and I'm optimistic they will get something, and I'm very, very keen that we should be able to support them, providing they get those changes that are binding. But you can't do that if then the other side knows that no matter what, you will leave. You will not leave, and therefore they can throw anything at you. That would be wrong. But to do it publicly, I think, is a mistake on their part.
So if it is a breach of collective responsibility, do you think they need to resign from the Cabinet then?
Well, that's a decision they have to take, and it's for them and Downing Street. I'm a backbencher now. I remember when I disagreed with the government, I departed because I just felt it would be dishonest to disagree with the government and then go on taking, as it were, the Queen's shilling. If you are in government, it's a privilege. It's a privilege not just for income, but it's a privilege because you wield a certain amount of power and influence. And I think, therefore, you need to think very carefully that that collective responsibility is how governments down the ages have worked, and it's how this constitution works. I do hope that they will reflect on that, because they're doing the Prime Minister no good at all, and they do government no good at all by becoming quite so publicly opposed to what is essentially government policy. The Prime Minister is absolutely right in this, that we cannot take no deal off the table, because we need to make sure that those in the EU, understand that Britain is leaving on the 29th, and then we will get some kind of move. And there's some quite good news out there, because I see that Steve Barclay has at least got the EU to move a bit, to say that they will now look very specifically at the stuff that we put forward as the Malthouse Compromise. Myself, other Leavers and Remainers came together to propose this. Now the EU is beginning to say yes. Maybe that is the solution. We'll look at that. We need to get that bound in. And, why would you undermine your own cabinet colleague, Geoffrey Cox, going over to try and negotiate a backstop to the backstop, and instead of which you tell them, don't worry about that because we will never leave on a no deal. Geoffrey Cox has to be able to negotiate that. So you need to support him.
You were talking a bit about being optimistic about the way the negotiations are heading. I mean, I have to say, I spoke to Simon Coveney earlier on the programme, the Deputy Prime Minister in Ireland, and he was absolutely emphatic that there are going to be no changes to the withdrawal agreement. So I just want to know, what do you need to see to be able to support the deal? Would changes to the future relationship be enough?
We've said that the changes need to be legally binding. We've been very clear about that. So
in the backstop? Well, in the withdrawal
agreement? They need to be legally binding. So, you define that. The way the withdrawal agreement is written, it itself is legally binding. The other one isn't. But, let's just see where the government goes on this.
So it could be an addition. It doesn't have to be in the text of the withdrawal itself.
I think it should be in the text, because that's the way you make it legally binding. But we'll see what the negotiations produce. All I would say to Simon Coveney is you have created a monster at the moment, because Ireland itself is in deep trouble if we leave without a deal. I mean, really serious deep trouble. They are now talking about that. There are big questions being asked in Ireland. Of course, Mr. Coveney is going to come on and say no change. But behind the scenes in the European Union, they know very well that they do not want us to leave with no deal. And the right thing to do is to make the changes. After all, what do we know about the backstop? It's utterly unworkable. Even the EU knows they couldn't implement it tomorrow if they tried, because it's got the most ludicrous border arrangements for the UK, rest of the UK and Europe, and it would create chaos. So you've got now an agreement to implement something which is unimplementable. Therefore, it has to have changes. Why not accept that and do the changes now? Agree to make that process of change part of the agreement. It's not a lot to ask, by the way, because it's common sense from all sides, and common sense is really what we're after. So let's let those going to do the negotiations negotiate, and I'd say to one or two of my colleagues in government, not a good idea to undermine them while they do that.
It's interesting about the undermining. I'm just, with my kind of cynical hat on, I just wonder if we are moving towards a situation where the choice put to MPs is a longer extension to Article 50 or the Prime Minister's deal. I mean, that seems to be what these members of the Cabinet are pushing towards. That was what Ollie Robbins, the Brexit negotiator, suggested when he was overheard in a Brussels bar. Do you think that's where we're going to end up?
Well, I don't actually, because the Prime Minister, to be fair to her, has been absolutely clear. Bear in mind,
Theresa May in whatever she says.
I trust the manifesto. It's worth reminding my colleagues. They all stood on a manifesto.
That hasn't stopped anyone.
Well, they stood on a manifesto that said leaving on the 29th, we're not staying in the customs union, single market, all the rest of it. So they were committed at the time of the vote. And yesterday, by the way, that was reinforced. I don't know if you spotted it, but the National Convention, which is all of the heads of the voluntary party in the Conservative Party, all overwhelmingly voted not to extend and to leave on the 29th, and basically in support of the Prime Minister. So that is a very powerful point, which is those people who've worked their guts out to get us here want us to get on and implement what the Prime Minister has said she wants. So we're not a million miles away from achieving a deal, but the key question is you need to be able to say to the European Union, we are united in facing out that you need to make those changes necessary, and that's the negotiation. You can't negotiate, and I don't know if any of them's ever negotiated before, but if you negotiate by saying, oh, by the way, don't worry, whatever we get, it'll be acceptable at the end of the day, and if necessary, we can carry on talking forever. You'd look ridiculous in a negotiation.
Okay, thank you very much.